have this discussion, so I'm going to start over here with men and let you introduce yourselves.
I'm Matt Brady. 10 years ago, I used to run a site called newsarama.com, which ran some comic news now and then. Since then, I've been teaching high school chemistry, physics, and along with my wife, I run thescienceof.org, which uses pop culture to look at science, and I have put some thoughts down about Aquaman and his world here and there.
My name is Tamara Robertson. I am a comic book artist, and I've illustrated such things as Black Panther, Walter Wakanda, Wonder Woman, Warbringer, and I am working on my series, Aquarius the Book.
So I am Tamara Robertson, and if you watch Discover Your Science, you may know me from Mythbusters or Side-Jinx. You will be seeing me January 2nd, starting on Mythbusters Junior with 6 of the smartest kids from across the nation, as well as our very own love, Adam Savage. Back at it again to bust some myths, so check that out. But I am also a chemical and biomolecular engineer and a huge fan of Comicon, so I'm here to talk superhero science.
North Carolina, so I am a little bit of the science of Aquaman, and glad to be here.
I mean, with that title, you're basically Aquaman. I mean, we'll get into that soon. So Aquaman is obviously finding himself in his first solo debut, but he's going to be thrown between the two worlds he loves, right? So I have seen the trailer. Have you guys seen the new posters that just came out this week? Oh my god. The costuming alone has got me nerding out so bad that I'm gonna have to wear a costume soon. But what are you guys excited about when it comes to the new movie? Ooh, I stumped him. I stumped the scientist. Look at this.
There's so much. I mean, it looks like it wants to go, it wants to bring in ideas of Game of Thrones or Conan, in that the Atlanteans would not be, they live in a much rougher environment than we do, and it would not be any kind of human-based civilization. It's not a democracy, and there's a lot more that's towards just the might makes right kind of idea of it all, much more gladiatorial in its way of justice and government, I think. That's going to be neat. But they have to blend that and make it still kind of something that make Aquaman a sympathetic hero. Plus, as I'm anxious to see how they're going to make all the science work. They did some nice nods to it in Justice League, where Aquaman showed up. Specifically, we were talking earlier about talking underwater, and when he had to talk to Mira in Atlantis, she spun up a air column so they could talk. And I'm like, that's pretty cool, because that takes away the whole problem of talking underwater, which we can't do, because we've all yelled under the water in a pool somewhere.
I'm really excited to see the tech. What kind of aquatic underwater tech are we going to see? Weapons, weaponry, like, I'm all about the gear. I'm just, with all of the various superhero flicks that have been coming out, there's almost this like race, it's like competition to see like who's going to out-tech who, and like, I don't know, they've got their hands full, like trying to out-tech Black Panther. So let's
So you set that bar pretty high.
That's fine though. Let's keep raising it. Let's go. Excited.
Well, I'm just excited that we, the land people, get drawn into the ocean, because it is the majority of our planet. 70% of our planet is covered with water. It is really the dominant form of life on the planet, and so to get pulled in, albeit in a little bit
Fantastic way.
fantastic way, but it's a lot of fun. I'm excited.
So, okay, now the comics have Aquaman and his father kind of questioning his heritage by age 2, because he, of course, runs out into the water and he has a really fun day full of giggling instead of drowning. So obviously, historically speaking, someone that can live under the water and talk to animals, as we see him do at the aquarium when Jason turns the shark on everyone. What exactly me, as a resident, like mermaid artist and expert, what types of superpowers that we are going to see with Aquaman do you think translate as well to mermaids? But also, like, why is there this draw of people to kind of equating things that happen natural disaster-wise, life-wise, with the oceans to a mythos of the mermaids?
I think that people move towards definition. They want to make things finite. So if they don't have an explanation for things, they want to give it. And one thing that I saw while researching different mythos from all over the world is that every single culture had flood. And with that myth came people who were able to go from the land into the water and vice versa, and they were considered deities. What I also saw was in things like cave paintings of regular animals that we see, some extinct animals, and then human hybrid animal fairy was, and it's sort of theorized that people who drew them also did psychedelics and would sort of report back, this is what I saw. And that was sort of a theme throughout, from ancient Mesopotamia to Turkey, and gosh, all over the world. As I'm discovering, there are some really strange tales. And one in particular is we all see her on the side of the coffee, but Melusine. They're sort of braided into history. I think people, when they see something, or if a technology is too advanced, they will call it whatever they can explain. So what if perhaps there was a great catastrophe, and many scientists are coming back saying that after the Emperor's rise, it was about 12,000, 13,000 years ago, that North America was ground zero for a huge catastrophe event. Rocks came from space, broke the ice sheet, raised sea level 400 feet, which, is significant. And could you imagine, just for a second, if Japan were not a chain of islands, but a mountain range? There are temples at the bottom of Lake Ewa. Like, there are all sorts of different, legends associated with this natural phenomenon. And I think it was just perhaps a lack of vocabulary, or even a way to transfer the information from one generation to the next, because he might not necessarily remember the pathway of comet ink, but we will remember her. So I think that's sort of the way to preserve a bit of knowledge within the story. And so what I'm doing is sort of exploring the overlap and getting to both the mystical and scientific, and see what it can blend together.
Very cool. So, okay, but Aquaman is obviously not the Little Mermaid,
Right,
right?
right.
So, a lot of us have associated instead with a marine mammal,
Right.
but Dr. Brady, as a marine biologist in a lot of our comics, how close is that? Obviously we know he's the son of an Atlantean queen and a human lighthouse keeper, so the genetics have to be close enough with the Atlanteans for that to be possible, but beyond that, how mammal-like is he?
Yeah. Well, just to clarify, I don't want to falsely represent. I don't have a PhD. I just have a master's in marine biology. But my wife has a PhD. But yeah, that's a really interesting thing when you think about, well, Aquaman, Atlanteans in the mythos of DC, they were people. And then their land got flooded, either by an angry god or some catastrophe, and they became water-breathing mer people. And that's kind of accepted DC lore, and it's kind of accepted. If we look at Aquaman, that's how we accept Aquaman. Okay, they lived underwater long enough, so they got their gills back. We have whales and dolphins. Whales and dolphins started on land, or were on land, and decided to go back into the ocean. They didn't grow their gills back. They still breathe air. They're mammals, like Aquaman, and they still breathe air, and they have adapted their body shape as well. And so, when we think about Aquaman and breathing through gills and walking on land, and it's from the straight hard science side of things, it is troubling. You kind of think, okay, well, being in water allows the gills to stay open. If you think about a fish has to pull water in across the gills, and they kind of stay fluffed out because there's water, which is denser than air, pushing them apart and pulling them apart. If you bring a fish out of water, don't do this, but if you bring a fish out of water, its gills will just kind of flop down, and nothing's crossing them, so it can't get the oxygen it needs, and it will die. Go by your grocery store and look in the counter at the poultry and the meat. And so it's troubling. But then again, it happens. So you wonder, okay, well, how did they make this happen? What could this be like? And I told you before, just like when you start to try to make it work, you kind of go crazy a bit from the science point of view because it doesn't work. But it is interesting when you start. Kind of what we do, my wife and I do, is we use this stuff with our classes, with our students, to really talk about it and say, okay, well, whales and dolphins didn't do this. You know, and what are the benefits of, if I go back into the ocean, why would I still want to breathe oxygen through air? Because, well, there's more oxygen in air. And I need a lot of oxygen, especially if I want to keep my body temperature up. And if I don't do that, then I'm going to die rather quickly and coldly in the water. So, yeah, the gills thing is really tough to do, and it's also, and you can all do your own little bit of copyright myth busting, because I think you've all seen the pictures or the news stories about, like the models. They have this thing that looks like kind of like a scarf, and they say wearable gills will allow us to all breathe underwater. There's no way that can work. If you run the numbers on it, run the physics on it, you'd have to suck through about 10 to 20 liters of water for every breath that you take. 10 to 20 liters of water, that's 5 to 10 2-liter bottles for a breath. That's a lot of water, so you'd have to keep moving really fast, like a fish. Or you'd have to have somebody pumping that water across those artificial gills. It's not going to happen. Humans are meant to breathe air. That's how we do it.
So they have those scuba things,
Yeah.
the big tubes and the weird dome, you just walk around.
Right.
So I wonder how humans would have to evolve. Of course, this would take thousands and thousands of years. Like, would we need a blowhole at the top of our
Have you ever seen, and this was like another kind of weird science thing, it was about 5 or 6 years ago, there was an artist and a scientist, I think in England, who kind of devised what would human beings look like if they were evolved for the 21st century. And I forget the guy's name, where they made a model or a mock-up of a human being, and they're like, called him Ned or something. And it was the most horrible, creepy, weird thing to look at, because it had like just layers of body fat and like short little stubby arms and a head that was like built right into the chest with no neck. And they said, well, this would be evolved to live in the 21st century, where we have things like cars. It would allow it to survive a car accident because it would be mostly padding and things like that. And so I was thinking about that today, and just like, what would it take for a human to evolve to go back into the water? If we look at whales and dolphins and seals, they have lots and lots of insulation to keep them warm. So I think we mentioned this last year when we all stared at the picture of Jason Momoa for a couple seconds. You would not be cut. You would look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And everybody, and I think like Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, would just kind of look at you and go, not that everything's all about appearance, but
He's getting really cold under the water.
he would lose all his heat underwater.
Less bodybuilder, more blue guy?
Yes. He'd be cuddly and a nice stuffed animal that you can make a lot of money off of.
Okay. Well, I like it. So actually, kind of going off of that, I'm gonna jump to you because, you spoke a little bit about the blowhole, and part of that is something that when they're surfacing, they're actually having to get the water out of the respiratory system. And if we were to not make an oxygen column bubble to talk underwater, Dr. Hall, how would communication work? Like, is it possible for what Aquaman does to occur, like what we see in the trailers where they're talking and they're yelling through the water? Like, what would that sound like? And then, is there that ability to actually communicate to animals? What would it take for us as humans to be able to do that?
The people are studying communication between cetaceans, whales and dolphins do communicate. The interesting thing is that water is actually not a bad medium for communicating in terms of it's a highly dense medium, so sound can travel long distance.
And sound travels faster underwater than it does in air.
You know,
So it blows my students' minds.
there are actually some advantages. Clearly, there's disadvantages. Certainly, you and I go underwater, and we try. My kids do this. Hey, let's go underwater. What did I say? You said bubble, bubble, bubble. You know. Yeah. So the way that these animals actually communicate is with higher pitched sounds. It is a form of, you could call it language. What dolphins use. Certainly, there's a potential for us to use some kind of technology that would allow us to convey some kind of information in that sort of way. So, but I don't think it would be, unless you make your air bubble,
Yeah.
you know, it won't be in our traditional way of speaking. Probably something parallel to what whales and dolphins.
And that would be something that would be so interesting, because I'm a big advocate of include as much real science in your story as you can, because it just makes it a richer story, a more relatable world. And that would, I think, would be so neat if the producers, but difficult, that Aquaman is, as he was shown in Justice League and the trailers a bit, he is not at home in the sea, he is not at home on land, he is walking this middle ground, which gives him this tremendous story potential as a character. But then also, you have people on the land show up and say, well, you need to tell your Atlantean pals to back off. And he goes into the water and makes noises and clicks and whistles and pops, and they make noises and clicks and whistles, pops back at him. He comes back out of the water, and the land people are saying, what did they say? Because, like, as you said, we wouldn't be able to understand them. If you grew up underwater, speaking underwater, it's not going to be English, and it's not going to be languages we understand, which would be neat to see in a movie.
Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe like, you know, you think about Star Trek back in the day before AI
Yeah.
existed, you could hear the computer. The computer was talking to them back and forth because it's obviously way cooler than just seeing them typing all the time. So maybe theatrically, we are hearing what Aquaman is hearing, not what the humans are hearing, but we could have the human perspective of them hearing the, you know, the little pops and all that.
Well, maybe it was Hunt for Red October, old movie back in the day where Sean Connery, as a Russian guy, was speaking in Russian, and they just zoomed in on his mouth, and then he transitioned over from Russian into English, and they zoomed out. And that was how they handled it for the rest of the movie. Maybe we are. Maybe we're not supposed to understand the language. I would love it if we don't.
Yeah, there's a little hat tip
Yep.
like that. So, one thing that really kind of blows my mind is thinking about the fact that if Aquaman can understand everyone in the ocean and all the animals, does that mean that if he eats fish, that he hears them screaming? Because
The last message the fish hears is, get in my belly.
but the last thing he hears is it going down and screaming. Because, like, honestly, I was thinking about this, and from a caloric intake alone, like, we see Aquaman, he's chasing German U-boats, he's outrunning torpedoes, he's outswimming dolphins, but when you start to think of that in a context, which obviously Justice League in the comics tells us he can swim 10,000 feet per second, and I'm checking my numbers this time, which is equivalent to like over 6,800 miles per hour. Now, putting that in context, Michael Phelps can only go sustained speed of 4.7 miles per hour. That's Michael Phelps, the strongest swimmer that we have. That's what he can offer us against Aquaman. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But thinking about it, like Michael Phelps has admitted that his caloric intake when he's swimming is 1,000 calories per hour. So if you then extrapolate that out, that means Aquaman is burning 1.4 million calories every hour that he is swimming at full speed. So really, the only animal that's going to give him that substance is tuna, because you get about 1,400 calories per kilogram. So he could literally would have to eat, by the way, 33 kilograms per day of tuna.
That's a lot of time.
That's a lot. It's a lot of time.
to eat 33 kilograms.
I don't even want to talk about the other end of what
Well,
happens after he eats all that.
Humans aren't that efficient machines, so you eat some, you get some energy, but there's a lot of ways.
There's a lot of ways, and then it's like also
Don't swim behind Aquaman.
Don't. There's a reason that current is so warm. year in a row that we've come back and we've done the science of an upcoming film. So as panel members, like, what do you think? And I hope that you guys will stand up and have questions and comments on this, but what do you think keeps bringing them back? Why do they keep coming back to see us talk about science and movies?
I'd like to think, both my wife and I use a lot of pop culture, as I said, in our classrooms. I like to think that in talking about the science of this stuff, of Justice League last year, of Aquaman this year, whatever we're talking about next year, that we're not, and the message please that I come across, we're not trying to kill the fun. We're not trying to come out there and just say, Aquaman can't exist. We're trying to say, well, this is really neat. Gills are really cool. How can I make this all work out so that humans could have something like gills? Here's the science, and you have to have a countercurrent, you have to have the blood coming in one way and the air coming, or the water flowing. How can I make that, something like that, work? And as I tell my students, and there's one sitting right there, but as I tell my students in classes, why isn't that you? Why isn't there someone here? And I would bet there is someone here, kind of like in that whole sense that the first person to put boots on Mars has already been born. Why isn't the person that figures out how we can kind of breathe or have a gill to assist us underwater? Why isn't that person right here? And I would think with the strong college programs and universities we have in North Carolina, I would think there's a good chance that person could be in North Carolina figuring out, this Aquaman stuff is kind of cool. I wonder what really we could do towards that and go with that.
Yeah, I think that like dreams are sort of the life. But I think that I think about Nichelle Nichols, who was Lieutenant Uhura. She was responsible for recruiting with a program that she initiated. Not only the first 5 women and Black astronauts into NASA, but she had an initiative where she was going around to different colleges and institutions, and people were watching the show, absolutely inspired by just all of the fantastic tech that they were seeing in Star Trek, and saying, well, I want to make that real. What can I do to make this possible? And so they, inspired by fiction, made it a part of them, because I think, we aren't sort of projecting to the future. Well, why not this? Why not this? Why not because of this? Okay, well, what do we have to overcome in order to do that? Absolutely agree that, the leaps between fiction and science, which is just are becoming closer and closer. FaceTime, the Jetsons, come on.
Dick Tracy and the little basic iWatches,
That's right, and so you're seeing technology being spearheaded by fiction. Let's face it, scientists are
I think, one of the things that you always see in the great stories is some kind of challenge, some kind of conflict. And we have wicked problems, real wicked problems that are out there. One of them is that we're going to have to feed a couple billion more people in the next few years. Some of that's going to come from the growing population. One of them is we are losing creatures on this planet, water and how do we simultaneously take care of the humans, take care of the rest of the creatures? So these are really challenging, wicked problems, and there are others that really intersect. How do we do things? We're talking about energy. How do we do things more energy efficient? So we use so much energy. Much of our energy still comes from sources that are not as clean as we think. How do we move over to cleaner sources? But also, how do we efficiently use the energy we have? And especially as we move into new technologies. I love iPhones, whether it's smartphones, because they are a low power device that's really functional. I mean, so the battery in them is quite small. So I think there's lots of opportunities, and we're going to need creativity. I love seeing all the concepts today. The creativity
those problems. But in the meantime, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of time, start thinking about some questions, but also keep your ears open because I want each of my panel members to tell you where to follow their adventures in science and superheroes. Yes. We'll do this, and while they think of,
You were talking about the, all the program, college programs and stuff, about, like, there's the person that wants to put people, that will put people on Mars is born yet, or is here, but what if it's like the person that can't afford college because maybe they're a fireman or money-wise or something like that?
Exactly. That's, I believe the phrase was wicked problems. We have them all. My wife and I teach in a Title I school, which means that we have a significant percentage of our students. Technically, the definition is that qualify for free and reduced lunch, which in and of itself is basically a marker of demographics, social, economic status. Basically, it boils down to a high poverty, high minority school. And that's, for 10 years I've been teaching there, and it's what you just said, gets me up, walking, going to work every day, is that, yeah, the person who is going to put their boot on Mars has already been born, and yeah, what if it is a student who is really hungry that morning and can't focus, and what can we do to fix it? And so without changing the whole tenor and tone of this panel, yeah, we got a lot of problems that we have to fix, and inequality is a major, major problem that has to be fixed, and it's going to take everyone to fix it, for the reason that you just said, that what if, and I know I'm not trying to get political or all in different directions, but yeah, what if the person who is going to figure out a cure for a cancer is in my class right now, but is so distracted, is so upset about what they saw in the hall that they just want to go out and fight? That's every day in our school. That's, my wife will agree, my student will agree. And that's our job then, is not just to teach the science, but it's also to make sure they're there and make sure they know. And so, yeah, wicked problems. The answers are not easy.
and it's also getting out into communities that aren't being spoken to. I spent a lot of time in Southern California in the summer teaching free camps to youth that are living in between Inglewood and Compton, and the reason why we're giving them free camps every week isn't just to inspire them, it's to ensure that they don't get recruited into gangs. So it's the same thing, if they get recruited before we can inspire them to try to live beyond where they were born, then we lose them automatically. So it's one of those things that I tell people all the time, where your story began doesn't define where it ends, you do. But at the same time, kids can only be what they see. So we have to, as grown-ups, be better. And we have to get into those communities, and we have to go and talk to those kids that no one else is talking to, and tell them that they're amazing, that they can do anything, and that they might be the hope that we need in this world.
I think also people don't so look to the past. Like my father, for instance, he grew up on a farm in Alabama. His family was very poor, but and he couldn't afford college. But he taught himself physics. He wanted to learn so badly, and because he didn't have a lot, he had a fire. He said, I need to learn this, and I need to change my circumstances because we're a very big family and we need to live better. I want my kids to have what I got. And so that he created innovation. And so he helped develop MRIs. He helped develop string theory. You know, so where he started is not where he ended. And even if you have the world against you, that doesn't mean that you are a victim. That means you just have a really big dragon to fight, and there's a really awesome sword on the other side of that door. You know, so I had a lot of things that I had to face. You know, I wondered where my next meal was coming from, and now I draw Wonder Woman. So I will tell anyone that, listen, you're going to have a lot to face in this life because life is different, nature is different. The problems of our planet are incredibly difficult to overcome, but because they're irritants, it makes them grow. You know, so those people there are plenty of examples in history of people who had just so much thrown at them and they decided to be graceful and giving. Community is absolutely important for that. So they think that, well, this is the only way I can go. It's not true. And I think that's also what's really important about superheroes. Showing, hey, look, we've got incredible odds against us. So how do we innovate? How do we find a way out of it? And that inspired me. I was always trying to defend my friends. I was kind of a band nerd, and I was on the subway, and my friend had gotten his book bag stolen. I started running into the next car. I dropped my bag on the floor, took off my shoes, and took off after him. Why? I was reading way too many X-Men comics. I just thought it was the thing to do. And I swung my boots over my head, and I hit him in the back of the head. I don't understand that. Don't do that. No. But the guy dropped the bag, looked behind, and like, oh, and I was like, my friend's instruments in there! And I could have gotten killed, but I didn't. And thankfully,
I know that y'all
sorry.
were talking about, how you do, like, this is my first time coming to one of y'all's science panels. And it's really cool. I like to enjoy things of, like, the way you're talking about science. It's like thinking outside the box. Like how it's like an outside the box thing. It's not just, like sitting in a stuff in science class. Y'all are, you're like, okay, let's talk about the science of Aquaman, or, you said you teach chemistry and stuff. Like, maybe bring in some Breaking Bad references or something like that.
Depending on the age.
I can't look like this and nobody bring in Breaking Bad. I had to grow my hair out because I was getting too many of them. But yeah, it's the intersection between fiction and science, I think, as you said, is extremely important because, in using again the Star Trek reference, I could get a little bit down on where should they Star Trek, because we imagine our future. And Star Trek inspired so many nerds and fans and future engineers that went out and said, holy crap, for the old school, a communicator is the coolest thing ever. And they made walkie-talkies better, leading up to this. And now, I think it was said yesterday, we have our tricorders and our communicators and our pads from Next Generation all in one. We imagine that. Yeah, technology probably would have pointed in some direction like this, but we imagine this. As a culture, as a society, we imagine this. Our storytellers pointed us in the direction, and we imagine the future into reality. And so now we can say, well, we're the Star Treks that are going to... They're out there. Marvel movies, DC movies, to an extent. But most of the Marvel movies... Aquaman, sure. But we're imagining our future again. And that's what's important about looking at this science fiction, looking at these stories, and then finding the science in it, and then inspiring and saying, why can't you? Why can't you? I brought in virtual reality, this Google Cardboard for my students. We passed it around the room, and everybody's looking at the Eiffel Tower. It's like, oh, this is awesome. And I challenged my students. I said, why would you ever want to live in a world without that? That's the coolest thing ever. Why would you ever want to live in a world that doesn't have something that you can put in your eyes and be anywhere in the world? They didn't have an answer for me, and they weren't supposed to, but it was supposed to make them think. It was one of my midnight questions for them, where they just kind of like find themselves laying in bed going, why would I ever want to live in a world that didn't feel like the future? And stories are where we find that.
So it looks like we are going to be running out of time, but I want to make sure that you guys can continue following everyone after this panel. So, Matt, if you want to.
I can be found at a couple different places. The scienceof.org is the website that my wife and I run, that I've written a bunch of articles about life science, physics, chemistry, in pop culture. We use pop culture as the Trojan horse. It hooks you, it brings you in, and then, science. I have an article that'll go up in the next couple weeks about Aquaman and gills. I recently wrote an article about why Mira's red hair is a lie. Sorry. Underwater, under about 10 feet, all red color disappears because the wavelengths to produce that red just don't get down there. Very interesting stuff. There's a video in that article where you can see it. But the sciencehub.org, and from there you can find us. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and our emails are there.
You can find me at afuarrichardson.com. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram.
And she also has a booth here.
Yes, I am right at 8105.
She has stuff like this.
Yes.
And I am at TLynR85, so TLYNNR85 on every platform. You can also Google me, which is weird. And I have a booth. I am bad at numbers, so I think it's 14, but I'm next to Jeremy Whitley, and I'm the one adoringly staring at Chuck Patton.
We are at NC State Bio and Ag Engineering, so we are BAE at ncsu.edu. And we've got Rebecca down here, social media, thanks to Robert as well. Doing some great stuff, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, so actually we're kind of out there.
Yeah, they're pretty hip. I'm just saying, Wolfpack.
And if you do check out NC, the BAE on Twitter, and they follow you back, make sure your wife's not looking on the phone when it happens because it says NCBAE is following you. Who's your North Carolina Bay? Hang on, let me look. Oh, please don't get anything wrong.
But I want to thank everyone for coming out. Definitely make sure to go to the theaters, give your support to Aquaman, and we do. Oh, okay. We have more time for questions. See, someone has a watch. It's a smart one. Go ahead.
So you talked a little bit about Aquaman's lack of the hormone regulation. Could you talk about how you would handle pressure regulation? Would you do that like an aquatic mammal, like a fish?
I would assume.
And how would you regulate sodium with you?
So it's actually as a diver.
Speed Force? I don't know. Yeah, that would be one of those interesting things. And again, it's one of those things, and I'm sorry I can't give you every specific answer for everything, because I don't think there are specific answers, because when Aquaman was made in the 40s, no one was even thinking about that. But I think it's one of those things where you can look at that from that point of view and go, I'm really interested in Aquaman. Well, wait a minute, later on I learned about this about fish. Well, how did that work out? Well, how did that change? And that could be the path that starts that person down the road to looking at sodium regulation in cells, which then ends up taking them to medical school, taking them in a different direction than Aquaman necessarily, but it's there. So the pressure stuff, I would assume it would be much like a marine mammal, where they sequester blood and fluids away. I don't know how you get away from the bends. As I said, once you start looking at like real human physiology and trying to make it work underwater, it's just like, oh, I don't know. There isn't.
As a diver, I did look into the whole bends thing, and the best example I could find was like a sperm whale, where they actually take the gas and they put it into their bones, but it makes their bones really porous and brittle, so Aquaman would not be, again, ripped and strong and everything else we see in us.
Your question, I guess.
This is for Aquaman Richardson. DC recently put out a book. I don't know if you know about it. It's called DC Anatomy of a Metahuman. The book's written from Bruce Wayne's point of view, and it's basically him breaking down all these different DC superheroes and supervillains and how their powers work and how the anatomy allows the powers and abilities to work. For you, Richardson, how does that type of information inform the way that you depict characters like Aquaman?
Well, that's interesting. For guys in the back who might not be able to hear, DC put out a book called Anatomy of a Metahuman.
Yeah, it's a hardcover book by a different publisher. It's a nice book.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And basically, it's Batman doing Batman things, which is breaking down the anatomy of each and every.
How do I kill everyone?
Right? Exactly. That is exactly what Batman does.
Just in case.
And that's why I love panels like this, because I like to innovate when it comes to my design, because there's so many iterations of a particular character. It's like, well, what would manifest in an actual Aquaman? Would his skin be kind of translucent? Would he, not really have any nostrils, but just the appearance of a nose?
That's for Charlie would be.
Would he, like, occasionally, like
kind of goes back to what you were saying, sir, about the sodium regulation, and I'm sure I'm remembering some marine biology from many years ago. But yeah, it's dark. When does darkness settle in? After how many feet? 30 feet? 30 feet is dark, underwater, you can't see. So all those pictures of this glorious city of Atlantis, it's dark, you can't see it. And there's no color. And it really, I talked about red, but there's no color after that. And so, that's like, have you ever seen like the pictures of like, in Finding Nemo, like when they went down into the trench, the horrible, horrible creatures? That's probably what they were. That's what they look like. It would not be Sexy Mara and cut Jason Momoa. So yeah, they would have tons and tons and tons of adaptations. We're set for living on Earth under 1G gravitational force. Aquaman would have pressures way beyond that, many hundreds of atmospheres of pressure. So it would just be lots and lots and lots. But again, and just a sales pitch, go into science. What could it be? What would the adaptations be, and why? And now, when you're thinking of, okay, well, to make Aquaman actually work and live under those pressures, that's really cool. Okay, you would have to have something like this. And then, when NASA's sending out the probes to Enceladus or Europa, and we've got to dig through 15 miles of ice to the water that's under there, and they go, well, if we find life, who's going to know anything about that life that would be living in this weird place way, way, way under the ice? Let's call that guy that really was interested in Aquaman as a kid and then just got it started. Let's call him and get going.
So you heard it here first, Aquaman would be ugly and be pooping all the time. So, we've seen him in theaters, and thank